And we're going to start off today. We have a full program. We're going to start off with our illustrious Max Dashu. She has founded the Suppressed History Archives in 1970 to research women's heritages in the global cultural record and make them visible. She uses images to teach about matricultures, ceremony, medicine women, witches, female rebels, and untamable women. For some reason my screen, there we go. As well as patriarchy, conquest, and systems of domination. She is the author of Witches and Pagans, Women in European Folk Religion, a forthcoming book on women in Hellenic mythography and patriarchy, and 2 videos, Women's Power and Global Perspective and Woman Shaman, the Ancients. Her current course is Matricultural Eyes via Teachable. And you could see more photo essays at a link that we're going to provide. In fact, I want to make everyone aware that I have written up a list of resources which will have all the links that we have as well on the website, but there will be a lot more in this document that you can download. It'll be a PDF, a link to a PDF document on the website that you can download with all of the references and all of the links that we have on here for each of the presenters, as well as a bunch of other things as in addition to that we would recommend for this whole topic. So let me turn the floor over to Max, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
I'm coming to you from Huchen, the lands of the Ohlone people in Central California, and acknowledge them and pay respects to them and their ancestors. So what I'm going to be sharing with you here is an excerpt, and let me just pull this up here. Let's see, screen share first. Is from a series. Oh, good, look, it went full screen, yay. All right, a series on patriarchy that also covers law, a whole lot of different angles, male violence. But this segment specifically looks at religion and the way that religion is used to encode values and to enforce behaviors in a systematic way. And so this is kind of a global look, and I'm going to just kind of go through some of the aspects of this, starting with the murder of goddesses. And this is Babylonian. There are various historical and also oral traditions of destruction of female power symbolized by a goddess, in this case, the Great Mother in the form of a sea dragon. And this is Tiamat being killed by Marduk. And of course, we've got St. George killing the dragon. There are examples of the same exact theme showing up, not related ethnically in any way to in the Norse tradition. So male violence against the powerful female. And lots of Greek mythology of the murder of Medusa, slaying of goddesses, male gods raping goddesses. I have a whole chapter called Mythic Conquest. It's going to be in my forthcoming books. And so basically we see the divine in female form being driven down, and the destruction of her iconography, the outlawing of her ceremonies, of her priestesses, the medicine women persecuted, the sacred things destroyed, and you have the toppling of statues within all of the Abrahamic religions. You have book burnings, you have any form of destruction. In some cases, the temple of a goddess is raised and has a Christian church built over it. And this actually happened to the Parthenon. It got turned into a temple of Mary. There are many examples of that. And then in the Byzantine Empire, you actually have a formal iconoclastic movement. And you notice that all the images here are of naked women that are being attacked here. And so the paganism did not give up easily. People were devoted to their goddesses. They went underground as saints, which is what actually they're looking at here. And this process continued as Christianity came with the Roman Empire, colonizing Europe, North Africa, West Asia, and following the lines of domination. But now this new ideology that took patriarchy to a deeper degree, because now it was the male had to be supreme in ideology, and you actually have physical supersession, so that Medusa heads are placed upside down, placed on their sides. There are all kinds of acts that formally subordinate the divine female to the new religion, whatever that will be. And we don't really know in the case of the Egyptian goddess. You notice that here the god's face is pretty intact, but they've completely knocked out the face of Mut. This is at Luxor. Karnak, both of these I think are Karnak, and they specifically target especially the goddesses and systematically, literally deface them, erase them. They cannot be seen. They're attacking the primal traditions. We also see a demonization of women who represent the goddess traditions. In the case of Jezebel, she is a Phoenician priestess who comes into Israel as the queen, marrying the king of Israel. And she brings with her her 450 priests of Baal and 400 of the goddess Asherah. Now, in Hebrew, the plural is always a masculine default, unless it really is all females. But you could have 300 females, one male, you're going to have a masculine plural. So don't know in this 10th century tradition whether there were priestesses, but we know the Phoenicians had priestesses. So that's what we're going to say. And so in the story, there's an attack on Ahab is killed and Jezebel is thrown from the tower. And so you have these torture executions, her body thrown to the dogs, and she gets recreated as a whore. There is a whole discourse that evolves, especially later on after the Babylonian exile, where anyone who reveres goddess is talked about in terms of whoredom, chasing after false gods, whoring after the goddess. And so this discourse develops that is very dishonoring toward females in general, but especially toward the divine and female form. And we do find examples of this in patriarchal cultures in the Americas, so that, for example, the moon goddess Coyolxauhqui is cut up into pieces, dismembered by her brother. And this is a complex story because she is also leading an attack on her mother. So there's multiple fractures of patriarchal legend made up here. But there's a ceremony in which during the sacrifices, the body of the sacrificed person would be thrown down to the steps of the temple, refiguring the primal killing of the moon goddess. And we see this happening also in sacrifices where a female victim would be flayed and the priest would dress himself in her flayed skin. So there's this appropriation of female bodies that has some really harrowing connections to serial killers in our time, not only dressing in the clothing of women, but sometimes also that use of her body itself by violent men. And then in the Chaco in Paraguay, the Chamacoco or the Ishir people have this complex tradition about a great goddess, Ashnuerta, who supports, according to the current tradition, men overthrowing female power, and they actually kill off all the women except the little girls, and then they raise them to become subjugated. They also kill the spirits, the Ahnabsero, and ultimately, this is just makes no sense at all, Ashnuerta instructs them to kill her too. And so, this is really just, it's part of this appropriation of ritual power because the men take over the ceremonies and they are made into the dominant class, and it's symbolized in this story. There's a whole series of gods who rape, basically the Olympian gods in the Greek tradition, deeply patriarchal theology. They're all rapists. The Titanes, the older deities, are not. The male figures, they have more of a partnership model. But you have not only the rape of Persephone, terrifyingly dragged off by Hades, who takes her off to the underworld, but we also have traditions in which Demeter herself is raped by Zeus, her brother, by Poseidon, her brother, and then even Rhea, their mother, is raped in some of the Orphic traditions. And so in her wrath, she becomes Demeter Melaina, the Black. And there are these amazing stories about her with multiple animal aspects in a statue in a cave, which of course is long since destroyed. But her story is one of a series in which the goddess is colonized. She remains in some of these traditions. For example, in Japan, Amaterasu Omikami, the greatest of all the spirits, the sun goddess, removes herself from their company after a series of symbolic rapes and acts of disrespect by her brother, Susanoo. And she says, I'm out of here. I'm having nothing to do with this. I'm going to remove my light from the world. As Demeter had also removed the power of growth from everything until her daughter Persephone is restored to her. And so she goes into a cave and she has to be tricked in this story to reemerge. The wrongs are never righted, which is also true, partially at least, for Demeter. So there's this shift that happens. The goddess remains, but she is now occluded in a certain way. She is brought into a patriarchal order. And we see something similar with Sekhmet. In this story, she's killing the enemies of Ra, but she goes into this wrathful ecstasy and does not stop killing. And so she has to again be tricked. And so they set out, they dye beer red, and they set it out so that she drinks the beer thinking that it's blood, and that causes her to fall into a drunken stupor. And so the slaughter ends. So these shifts, disrespectful shifts of the power of goddess go on. Something very close to that also from India, where Kali is also on a rampage and slaying the demons. And the gods are, oh, what do we do? How do we stop her? And so Shiva, her partner, lays down before her, and once she steps on him, she realizes, oh, this is my husband. I must not, blah, blah, blah. So her rampage stops. And this story is also linked, this tongue out, this wrathful tongue hanging, which you see on the Gorgon, which you see on Rangda, the widow goddess of Bali. This wrathful crone aspect of goddess is redescribed in this story as a sign of shame, that she was ashamed because she's standing on her husband. But it's very interesting iconography because you have the Black woman standing on the body of a white man. So reversing the order of domination. And another thing that happens in India is this is one place where the goddesses do survive, but there are myriads of stories that colonize them and subordinate them to their male partners. So you will see many stories about Lakshmi massaging the feet of Vishnu. She is his servitor. She is subordinated to him. Of course, in the Christian tradition, you have the uptake of the demonized snake, which very interestingly, I have a separate show about this, the goddess veiled. There are at least 20 images of the snake of the tree of knowledge in Genesis being envisioned in European Christian art as a goddess. And so this is one, and you even have this kind of Kundalini thing going on here with the snake coiled around the tree. But Adam is kind of just, inserting himself here, but we still see this connection, this transmission between the snake goddess and Eve, whose name Hawa means life. There's a whole lot of things about the European tradition. I have entire slideshows about this, but I want to concentrate on the demonization of goddess inside the European folk traditions. And I talk about this a lot in the book that I wrote, which is In Pagans, Women in European Folk Tradition. So there's a series of bishops who reconstruct the goddesses as demons. And one thing that happens is that they say, well, there's this goddess Diana, and women go in spirit flight with her in the company of ancestors and land spirits. But this is all illusions of the devil. And this story begins to enter canon law in around the 900s and going on for the next several centuries. So there is this idea that the goddess is the devil. Diana is the devil. And you may have heard of Tomás de Torquemada, who was one of the leaders of the Spanish Inquisition in its inception. And so this is the understanding of the church. They're very clear about what they're doing. They're demonizing the goddess, and they are persecuting those who worship her. And Diana, the name Diana, stands in for a lot of local goddesses in the ethnic traditions. But all in all, we have a demonization of any powerful female figure. So here is Eve, and she's shown here with the goat, which stands in as a sign for the devil in a lot of European traditions. Interestingly, also, the black billy goat is a symbol of the goddess Mari in the Basque traditions. So there are these clashing themes going on. And then in the book of Revelations, you have the whore of Babylon riding on this chimeric being, which is described in that last of the Christian canon. And so this is a favorite theme in the art, and another demonization, whether it's the queen, whether it's the goddess, something to hate, a target of everything evil. And you see these themes continuing in the period of the witch hunts. Very interesting merging, the goddess of heresy, as she's called here. So the idea of a richly clothed woman, bejeweled, they've got ass's ears that they put on her. But what's I find really interesting in here is the cloven feet, the feet of a deer, because this is a theme of the fairy women in Norway and Scotland, a lot of different folk traditions in Europe. The fairy woman is a survival of goddess venerations. So you see her here demonized. And there's actually quite a few images of devils in the witch hunt period, showing goddesses, showing the devils as female. In the Buddhist tradition, you have in some of the oldest scriptures out of the Pali Canon, like the Anguttara Nikaya, Buddha telling women, telling his disciple Ananda how foolish women are, how immoral women are stupid, lots of different quotes like that. And also instructing wives to obey husbands. Women, of course, are not initially given the right to be inducted, to be initiated as religious ascetics in this tradition. And the aunt of Buddha, who helped raise him, has to beg him numerous times to let them in. And they only do so. This is probably a late tradition, not from Gautama Siddhartha himself, but this becomes attributed to him, the 8 hard conditions or the severe rules, the Garutamas. Nuns are formally submitted to even the most junior of monks. So a boy that was initiated that day has more authority than a woman, as it says in the scripture, who has been a nun for 100 years. And they have the rules involve being under men's guidance, authority really. They have to stay near them. They have to do public penance for any wrongs, which include, of course, just any kind of female sovereignty. And they must never, ever rebuke a male for any reason. In East Asia, also, you see this demonization of women as very much having to do with the flesh, and especially attacking menstrual blood as something horrific that drags women down and associates them with the demonic. And this is especially a theme in the Blood Bowl Sutras, which the women are cast into hells and the Buddha has to save them, or some bodhisattva has to save them from the abasement of their very material femaleness. The Buddhism, like Christianity, comes in as a code of domination over the older traditions. And you see this a lot in Southeast Asia with the Knots, the spirit peoples of the Burmese people, in Cambodia and other places, this demonization of the ancient deities. And often there's a demonization of blackness or of darkness that goes along with this. But in Tibet, the Tenmas are originally spirits of the land. And you've got this very shamanic theme of a wrathful goddess riding on the back of an animal. This is something that you see in monastery murals. But what happens is they are subdued by the law of Buddha, and then they are converted and made into Dharma protectors. So this is something that's similar to what happens with the saints in Europe, is you have this conversion process, and they are subordinated but folded in to the now dominant tradition. So Palden Lamo, for example, becomes the leader of the Dharma protectors, and she's actually worshipped by the Dalai Lama and the rest of the Tibetan male monastic hierarchy. But this conversion process had to take place. She had to be brought in underneath the dominant code. And there's a way that this is actually done ceremonially, where the ancestral mother, Shrinmo, who is really the earth mother, her body, her heart in particular, has to be pierced in the ground in laying out any temple or monastery when it is built. And this is still being done. So before they can put down a foundation stone, then she has to be pierced with the purva, with the ritual knife. And so then geographically, the goddess, physically, the goddess is subjugated in this way. So this is formalized in ritual practice. If we go over to China, Confucius or Kongfuzi, there's a massive encoding of domination hierarchies. Man over woman, lord over peasant, Chinese over subjugated peoples, and women are the ones who produce disorder. It's nothing to do with male violence, with colonialism, with rape, with all of the things that we know as historical patterns. Women are to blame for everything because of her stupidity. It is it is incumbent upon her to distrust herself and obey her husband. And so, as happens in all of the patriarchal religions, you have women absorbing these codes and then enacting them. Also, the monk Mencius, as he's known in anglicized mode, says that his mother said this, but this is a rule that we see not only in China, but also in the laws of Manu in India, and also in Roman codes. It does not belong to a woman to determine anything of herself. She is subject to the rule of the three obediences. When young, she has to obey her parents. When married, she has to obey her husband. When a widow, she must obey her son, which just so happens is him. Always so convenient. Anyway, the women, so there's a woman named Ban Zhao who is really famous. There aren't very many women recorded as scholars. She's the one who has been most elevated in Chinese historical memory. And she preaches the Confucian rules. So instructing women to be reserved, quiet, chaste, orderly, to govern herself, to maintain a sense of shame. And this female shame is a line that runs throughout all of this, even from Aphrodite in the pagan tradition, where you see statues of her ineffectively holding her hands over her breasts and her mons veneris because she's naked and she's ashamed. The shame code is very, very crucial to patriarchal domination. But this line blows me away. A husband is heaven, and heaven cannot be shirked. Why would you want to shirk heaven? But you have to bend your will to him. And she says, nothing equals in importance the imperative duty of obedience. We're still seeing this. This is not just China. This is the code of patriarchy as it's enjoined upon women. And so we see women playing this role of scolding and disciplining and punishing other women because they are not following the domination of men. And there are all these morality tales. So these are from books on ethics. And the wife sells herself so that the husband can eat. So she's going to become an enslaved, prostituted woman so that he will benefit because she is nothing. And her servitude as a vassal, as a female vassal, is everything. In a contradictory message, the maid of Gao Yu is praised because she starved herself rather than sell her body. So here is her corpse up here. She's wandering the wilderness without anything to eat. And the writer says, losing chastity is a serious matter. while death by starvation is by comparison a small matter. Women's life is a small matter, according to this, and you'll see similar stories in Christian Europe. So the second wife, the concubine, the enslaved woman, terrible sufferings going on. I have a post on the Suppressed Histories page on Facebook about a palace revolt of these enslaved concubines who were being abused during the Ming Dynasty. But the Gongguo Go, this is offering 100 merits. This is a code of ethics. So they're saying, wow, we're going to give 100 times more points to anyone who leads back to her home, quote unquote, a woman or girl who has escaped. So the confinement and the servitude is really underlined there. Now, from a very different cultural world of East Africa, we have a Muslim woman, wife of a sheikh, telling women in the same way as Banjal had, that their duty is to please the husband. That is how it will be decided. Do you go to paradise or to the fire? Do not refuse his commands. You must ask his permission to leave the house. You must sit with your master, obey him, that you may meet with no loss in this world and the next. So there are a lot of these kinds of instructions. And there are, again, these codes of this, in this case, would be, I spelled that wrong, Persia, Iranian codes, Muslim codes of the punishments awaiting women if they did not wear hijab, or they would be strung up by their tongues for mocking their husbands. And here you've got Muhammad overseeing these horrific torments, and hung by hooks in their breasts in hell if they dared to bear children by other men and claim that the husband was really the father, because female fidelity, this is the sexual double standard. He can have 4 wives, he can have prostitutes, he can do whatever he wants, rape his slaves. Okay. She, however, is heavily policed. And of course, I'm not going to go in depth in the witch hunts, but this use of fire, the torment of fire, is something very widespread. We see a lot of examples of it in Indo-European tradition, including the Greeks. Certainly the European witch hunts use this extensively for over a millennium. But we also see elements of this in certain Semitic codes. In the laws of Leviticus, somewhere there is burning alive as a penalty for the daughter of a priest who committed whoredom. So there's these terrifying female penalties. And sometimes it's not even constructed as a punishment, but simply the duty of the wife, since she is nothing without her husband, that when he dies, she is pressured to throw herself on his funeral pyre. She's alive, he's dead. She's going to have this horrific immolation while she's alive. And the society looks on and approves of it. So there are scriptural references to this in the Rig Veda, telling widows to step into the pyre wearing all of their ornaments and not being upset about having to be incinerated alive. And this is also Krishna's wives in the Mahabharata are praised for going to the pyre. And this is also said of one of the wives of Pandu, a very important character. And we'll see Puranas saying that it is required scripturally, the highest duty of the woman, to immolate herself after her husband. Related to this is the code of Pativrata, which literally means a woman vowed to a lord, and she is supposed to worship her husband. She's supposed to touch his feet in token of her submission to him. And the laws of Manu, which are full of patriarchal and casteist oppression, say that even if the husband has no virtues whatsoever, or if he is going and fucking other women, he must constantly be worshipped as a god by the faithful wife. So there's lots of treatment of women as chattel in the biblical laws of Moses, and the rape penalties are really offenses paid, reparations paid to the male owner, whether it's a slave or the father or the husband. And you've got virginity codes, a stoning of women for fornication. This is very sexed hierarchy going on, male headship, male privilege on every level, sexual access to women. And girls, when a girl is born, the mother is unclean for twice as long as when she wears a boy. There are also chastity ordeals that are prescribed in the book of Numbers. And so if a man feels jealous and thinks his wife is unfaithful, he can literally put her through an ordeal. And she is forced to drink a mixture of barley meal with holy water and dust swept up from the floor of the tabernacle. And she has to swear an oath saying she has not lain with any other man. But if she has, then by swearing this oath, then her belly will swell up and her thigh will fall away, and it will cause her to be either made ill or to die. So scriptural codes are really key elements in colonizing women formally with the authority of the male god. And this is a very controversial verse in the Quran. It's pretty clear, though. Men, they translate this other different ways. Men are in charge of women and preeminent over women because Allah has made one superior to the other. Guess which one? And so good women are obedient. And women who rebel must first be warned, second, be left alone in their beds, and third, beaten. And then if they obey you, then don't punish them anymore, because the husband is given by scriptural fiat this authority. There is enforcement of patronage. And if the husband, in a fit of rage, divorces his wife, he has the right to take her back. Women have similar rights to the rights against them, but men have a degree over them. And then there's a whole other layer of things that are not in the Quran, which are in the Hadith. And these are sayings attributed to Muhammad, and they get worse and worse. So here, wives ought to prostrate themselves before their husbands. And we saw that in that Kenyan woman's advice. Another aspect is that men have the right to go to their wives, who are their fields, any way they want. So there's an authorization. If the woman doesn't want anal sex, too bad. He gets to have whatever he wants, because her refusal is nushuz, or rebellion, and she can be punished for that. She can be divorced for that. She can be cast off for that. I'm not real clear on the time. I forgot to bring my clock, so I hope I'm good. I have more. Anyway, there are many variants in Sharia law that have some more strict, like the Safiya laws, and others more looser, but they're all patriarchal codes. Now, I want to shift to another aspect of patriarchal religion, which is the barring of women from the priesthood, from full ordination, in the case of the Buddhist tradition, the religious hierarchies and the authorities on scripture and on the religion itself are all male. So we see this here with the Catholics, the Orthodox Church. It's true also with the mullahs, the imams, the qadis, which are the judges in both the Shia and Sunni versions of Islam. Even the Zoroastrian priesthood was all male, and there's a move away from that happening now, as there is in many of these traditions. In Buddhism, there's an absolute ban on full ordination for women in the Theravada traditions, and actually also in the Tibetan one. And so there's a whole way that there were lineages of nuns, but they died out because people wouldn't give them alms, wouldn't give them monasteries, wouldn't contribute to their temples. And so it became all male, and the female lines died out. In current Hindu temples, and this is beginning to change, the pujari or the purohit has to be a man, even in the temples of the goddesses. And so they are the authorities. And then in Protestantism, one of the most notorious lineages is the Baptist ordination, which has really, the Baptist Convention has voted, like within the last 10 years or so, to formally subordinate wives to their husband, following the Pauline scriptures. And so this very, very strong patriarchal thrust, which we see being lived out in demonstrations here at the Texas legislature. And you have to stay home. You have to submit to your husband. You remain silent before our authority. And this is a book for women, God's instructions to women. You are never so high as when you are on your knees. And so they feed this to women, and women buy it. Some women buy it. So we do also see male predominance in priesthood in Central America among the Maya and Aztecs. And there's some tendency in this African diasporic versions of Lukumi from the Yoruba tradition, you see a shift toward all male authority so that, for example, they have no Ianifa traditionally in Cuba. They have babalaos, so the men are the authorities who can cast the cowries. And again, this is something that was not original in the Nigerian homeland, but it crept in, as did the ban on women drummers, which is not true of most African societies. We're also seeing evangelical Christianity acting as a colonial and patriarchalizing religion among the Guarani in southern Brazil. And they're going after medicine women and female elders, and they are browbeating them and grabbing them by their hair and threatening them with machetes and accusing them of witchcraft. And so I took this from a video, and you see the hand on the head. This is very disrespectful, and waving around these machetes and trying to force these women into submission. And so the last part I want to share with you here is having to do with exorcism, because this is one way patriarchal authority is enforced. And you see this naked woman being pushed around by a male exorcist. I don't know a lot about these, but these are said to be exorcism chairs. And so the woman or whoever it is forced to sit on these knives. And, so a form of torture, really, in order to force the submission. And this was widely practiced in Europe in the Middle Ages, and especially during the period of the mass hunts. So again, the female is possessed by devils, and you've got the black devil meme going on there. He's jerking her around here using his pallium. She's forced to her knees. He's reading scripture at her, forcing her to drink things. Men are restraining her. She's struggling. Again, devils coming out of her mouth. And these are rituals of submission to male authority in the form of the priest. Here's another evangelical minister tearing off her clothes, probably insinuating that she is somehow a slut. So there are these very rapish kinds of ceremony, and other women are standing by, but the men are running this show. In India, too, there are informal exorcists, and here the exorcist is a woman who earns her livelihood from subjugating other women. So a daughter-in-law is not obedient enough, she's not submissive, and so they say, well, she's possessed by demons, and we have to drive out the demons. So this ordeal that they put her through is intended to look at grabbing her by the hair, using pincers to actually torture her, like pulling out fingernails, to bring her back into her submissive role. And this is exactly what we see going on in the fundamentalist churches. The same gesture, grabbing her by the hair, and her screaming in pain, and all of the men standing around watching this male enforcement. So this exorcism is part of current practice in these highly patriarchal fundamentalist churches, and it's also happening inside Muslim communities. This is in the UK, so she's fully veiled. Not an inch of flesh can be shown. This is on TV, so he's got a microphone, and he's browbeating her and preaching at her and forcing her to her knees and bringing her into submission. Satan, it turns out, is really a she, and Lucifer and her entirely beastly system. So there is this constant recurrence of the demonization of anything having to do with female power, anything having to do with goddess. There can be no female divine. It has to be a he. And what does this result in? The all-male priesthood actually results in rapes in confessionals, women being forced to recount masturbation, and then the priest raping them, children being raped, and the hierarchy covering it all up. And this all finally comes to light, but this has been going on all the way along, because when you give that kind of authority to men over women and children, then this is what happens. And so we see the religious codes then in turn being transferred to government. I mean, this is the church and state have been hand in hand with this all along in the history of Christian Europe, and we named all the other places, but males will decide whether women have the right to control our own procreation. And we have the browbeating of a female Black nominee to the Supreme Court by Ted Cruz and others who are race baiting her and trying to catch her with gotcha questions so they can derail her nomination. So these far right fundamentalists are very much enemies to women. They are actively enforcing, as we speak, state by state, taking away the right to abortion. And we cannot ally with these because they are integral to the system of male domination. So that's what I have to share with you today. And of course, there's lots more, but I tried to condense this, and hopefully I kept this to the 30 minutes.
You have to unmute whoever's talking now.
Fantastic work, Max.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Max. That was marvelous. Fantastic presentation. I wanted to remind everyone, I put it in the chat, but I neglected to say this at the beginning. Any questions that you have, just put them in the chat, and we will, we will ask them at the discussion. We will have time at the end of all these presentations to have a spirited discussion about all of these things. So we're going to move now to our next illustrious presenter, Nina Paley. And Nina is, she is someone who came up with some really unusual award-winning animated musical features like Sita Sings the Blues and Sadomasochism. And Sadomasochism is a film loosely following a traditional Passover Seder and events from the book of Exodus, retold by Moses, Aharon, the angel of death, Jesus, and the director's own father. But there's another side to this story, that of the goddess, humankind's original deity. Sadomasochism resurrects the Great Mother in a tragic struggle against the forces of patriarchy. Nina has also written a book, The Sadomasochism, a Haggadah and Anti-Haggadah. And her newest project is Apocalypse Animated, illustrating the book of Revelation. So Nina is, we're going to do a little, little trailer from Sadomasochism, and then she's going to share some pages of her book with her screen sharing, and then we're going to also listen to a great song, animated song that she wrote called God is Male, that we can all laugh along with. So go ahead, Nina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Max. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that was great. You hit so many things that I have illustrated and thought about, and I communicate those things via visual art. So let me see if my screen sharing works. All right, I have to share sound, and I'm going to hope that this works. Okay, here we go. Whoop. Please restart your audio sharing application as the media. Oh boy, hang on a second. Is this working? Somebody say yes or no. All right, I'm going to play this. I hope it works.
Yes, it's working.
Yes, so far.
Do you think the events in Exodus actually happened?
What kind of question is that to ask me? I don't care.
Okay, did that work? Did the sound come through? Yes? Oh,
Wow.
all right, good. All right, now let me do screen sharing without the sound. Just a moment. I have to find the other presentation. There we go. All right. Yes, I want to open 110 items. So I am getting ready to show you spreads from this book, the Apocalypse, or not Apocalypse, Sadomasochism. I'm stuck. The Sadomasochism, Haggadah, and Anti-Haggadah. And if you give me just a moment, I should be able to share screen again. Okay. All righty. Let's view this as a screen show. View full screen, slideshow. Okay. All right, so this is what you see inside of that book. Oh, I have to hide some of this stuff. So I don't know if y'all have seen a Haggadah before. It's the little book that you use at the Passover Seder. It's very stilted language. And at the Seders I attended when I was young, we would mostly kibitz. My family was atheists. And so I imagined the goddess who has been sent underground in the book of Exodus and in the whole history that Max had just shared. What if she's attending this Seder? And my conception of the goddess, I should say that I don't actually practice any religion. When I was working on this project, it was about the book of Exodus, and I just found myself unable to relate to Moses and Aaron and any of those, or Pharaoh, or really any of the male characters. And it took me a while to figure out a way into the story that I could relate to it somehow. And that way was through the goddess and the suppression of the goddess, and also the suppression of the people that worshiped the goddess prior to the establishment of Judaism, which is what Exodus was about. So I had to imagine the goddess, because there is, we have lost continuity with whatever goddess religion people were observing before, and I had to sort of make her up. And I guess I gave her a voice that is sort of my voice, but also sort of her voice. I just want to say that this is, it's art, and I did my best. So if this offends anybody, then my apologies. Anyway, she says, "Welcome, sisters." Whoops. Oh boy, come on, we can do it. Oh, wow, there we go. When I share screen, it doesn't really work. Oh, now it's in slideshow mode. I see what's happening.
Forgot how to.
Okay. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors forgot how to read plants and animals, sky and water, and wind, sun and moon, and each other. Instead, they learned how to read words. This is called the Great Forgetting. And also, I have to do something because something is covering my screen. Oh, and I can't read because part of the Zoom interface is covering my screen, and I cannot read the words that are here. There we go. Move this away. We can't remember what we lost before words, so we are gathered here tonight to remember words. Words, words, and more words. Here's the goddess up against the words. You may be familiar with this whole theory of the evolution of the suppression of the goddess coinciding with the elevation of written language and abstraction. Still, nature persists. The web of life, strands of fungi, wild yeast, bacteria, and other microbes that connect all living things is not extinguished. If you leave out flour and water, life will find it. Bread dough rises with life and nature. The goddess lives in the very food we eat. Our first task of the Seder is to kill her. And this is referring to matzah, unleavened bread, which there's this story that I was told that everybody's told, that matzah somehow represents Hebrews fleeing Egypt, not having enough time for their bread dough to rise. It doesn't actually make any sense to me. Well, I'll get to what matzah means to me. Here's the goddess again. God didn't give you the Sabbath. He took away the rest of the week. I'm just skipping through the traditional parts. Right. Ancient Hebrews were obsessed with unleavened bread, but not because they were pressed for time. Busy fleeing Hebrews couldn't possibly have upheld the 18-minute rule. Grain combined with water and allowed to stand raw for longer than 18 minutes becomes leavened. Furthermore, unleavened showbread was continuously required in the tabernacle temple, whether Pesach was being observed or not. No, ancient Hebrews were obsessed with unleavened bread because it demonstrated dominance over nature and the goddess. Bread without mother. By eliminating the fertile chaos of microscopic life, matzah embodied and symbolized control. Matzah's early example continues today in agricultural fields sterilized of soil bacteria, fungi, and animals, industrial medicine based on sterilization, and the sterility of the colonized mind. Civilization now dreams of matzah in outer space, the greatest desert of all, where men seek to escape the gravity of the great mother they long ago scorned. I should say that I live in central Illinois and I take bike rides a lot, and I am confronted with sterile soil everywhere. And it breaks my heart, but that's how we live, and I don't know any other way to live. So that informs my writing here. You can see it going back and forth. The point of this book is we're going back and forth between the patriarchal and the goddess-y point of view. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Exodus story where the Egyptians were killing all the firstborn boys, all of the Hebrews, somehow because their population was too great. This doesn't make any sense. Egyptians and Hebrews knew that killing males wouldn't slow population growth. They knew where babies come from, the mother. But the whole point of the Exodus story was to seal the father as the sole source of life, with no other gods or goddesses before him. Mothers became mere vessels for fathers. Casting proto-fathers into the river was the greatest existential threat the patriarchs could think of. And so it was written. Sisters, history is words, words, words. Because the patriarchs wrote it, they were on the right side of history and the wrong side of reality. Skip through here some more. Here are the plagues. Everybody likes some plagues. And by the way, you know, in making this stuff, I, probably like many people here, I chafe under what we have. I chafe under the, you know, patriarchal religion that we have. And at the same time, it is my cultural inheritance. And so it's what I have, right? Like I don't treat these stories, the patriarchal side of them, with contempt or disrespect. I'm sad about this. I'm sad about the status of women, but like it or not, I was born in civilization and this is my cultural inheritance. So I don't seek to, I don't see that there's any way to destroy this, and I respect it as culture, if that makes sense, even while I critique it, and hopefully I'm not super reverent. Here is the angel of death taking away the firstborn Egyptians. And of course, again, in the book of Exodus, there's all this reference to the people that weren't Hebrews and the pre-Abrahamics. And there was still goddess worship in Egypt, even though at the time it was patriarchal, and the status of women was definitely on the decline, but there still was some goddess worship there, and that's what the Hebrews had to stamp out. More Exodus pictures.
Nina, one quick question.
Yeah.
I think I mistakenly understood that this book is in progress, but it's actually for sale, isn't it? I think
It's done. Yeah.
yeah, there's a link on Amazon, I think I included. But
Yeah. This book was done a few years ago. I actually just looked at it again myself after a couple years, and I was like,
Okay.
oh, yeah,
right,
pretty
right.
good book. It's on paper. Let's go through here. People ask me a lot about Miriam. Oh, and by the way, after all this prayer to our Father, I include a prayer to the goddess, an ancient prayer to the goddess. Yeah, so people ask me about Miriam a lot, and here's my thought about Miriam. Miriam is thought to be Moses's unnamed older sister who watched over the baby prophet as he floated down the Nile on a raft towards Pharaoh's daughter. Later, Miriam's well is said to have supplied the wandering Hebrews with water until Miriam's death. But in Exodus itself, Miriam is mentioned only in one passage in chapter 15 that goes, and Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and dances. And Miriam answered them, sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. Miriam's role expanded in Mishnah, elaborations on Torah, and further inflated by those who long for more prominent females in, is expanded, sorry. And Miriam's role is expanded in Mishnah and further inflated by those who long for more prominent females in their masculine texts. Some set a cup at the Seder for Miriam as well as Elijah. Was Miriam a leader of the Exodus? If so, she would be an architect of the patriarchy that oppressed her sisters. Rather than forming lasting alliances with women outside her tribe, Miriam's loyalty was to Hebrews and their male supremacist regime. Perhaps Miriam was a priestess of a local pre-Abrahamic religion who threw in her lot with the Hebrews and their male god for political reasons. In the end, she angered this god by complaining about Moses's relations, or lack thereof, with his Cushite wife, and was banished from the camp with leprosy. This week-long ban was considered a miracle of God's compassion and favor, as most camp bans lasted 2 weeks. And that, sisters, is what happens when you carry water for men. And then I talk about Jezebel, which Max brought up also. So Max explained who Jezebel was. I write, Jezebel's gruesome death and the elevation of Elijah sealed the Great Mother's complete expulsion from the Hebrew religion. Sisters, if you keep this holiday of words, pour a cup for Jezebel. We have lost sorry, I have to move this little window again. We have lost whatever came before words. She was one of the last to try to preserve it. And when I talk about what came before words, I imagine when humans did live on the land and, whatever goddess religions humans practiced back then was pre-literate. It had to be, because literacy comes with accounting, which comes with land and property, and all of that brings male domination everywhere, as far as I know. And since I'm literate, I can't really even imagine what it was like to not be literate. Oh, hang on a minute. Right. So I don't think there's much more goddessy stuff here. This is all stuff, the images here you can see in the movie Sadomasochism, which is free. I'm going to scoot out of this now. And because of stuff that Max shared, I actually hope it's okay if I share some Apocalypse Animated, which is the Book of Revelation stuff, which didn't even occur to me to share this until Max talked about the whore and how women are depicted as whores. So I designed a whore of Babylon that looks quite different from other whores of Babylon. And my goal in this design was to bring to life the way the text was describing her and the sort of contempt that John the Divine seemed to have for, well, the feminine or the female or the goddess. Let's have a look. Yeah, so that's my whore of Babylon.
You're missing out.
Can you see this?
The whore of Babylon.
Yeah, are you able to see the screen? Yes, okay.
Runs
So-
the design.
That's awesome.
This is apocalypseanimated.com. This is the horror here on top of one of the beasts, the sea beast. This is her cup of filth. This is the mark on her forehead. It's very long, so it wouldn't fit into one little forehead. There she is again, beast. Apocalypseanimated.com is free. You can see all of this stuff there.
Apocalypse animated.
Oh, and then the burning. Yes, Max talked about burning a lot, and the whore is definitely burned. Also, the whore is a city. She's equated with the city. It's not clear whether it's Babylon or Rome. Here I have both. Here's some more. Oh, yes, she's the habitation of devils. This is the wine of the wrath of her fornication that's corrupting everyone. This is the people coming out of her. This is, oh yes, her sins. Her sins have reached unto heaven. Yeah, and then she's just getting burned. So I wanted to show that. And then also I wanted to show later in the book of Revelation. Let's see if I can get this. 21. So this really surprised me at the end of the book of Revelation. There's all this talk about the New Jerusalem. And in illustrating this, I just took it as an illustration gig. I was just like, okay, I'll do my best to represent what's in the text. The weirdest thing is, as I faithfully followed the text, there were things like this: fountains, the fountain of the water of life. And of course, the New Jerusalem is described as a cube. It's a box. And there's all these portals. He's really into the portals. The 12 gates, describes them in elaborate detail and how they have angels in front of them. And so I'm just like illustrating along, and I start to think, you know, from a Jungian perspective, this is pretty vaginal. And I keep going. You know, it's a box, it's a cube. And I swear this was not on purpose. Here's the inside. There's the lamb again. And there's this river of life now that comes out of the throne of God. And I just drew it that way. And I'm like, yeah, this seems to be getting more vaginal all the time. And there's the tree of life, which straddles the river that comes through it. So you basically have these portals. It's wet inside. It's straddled by things. And I was like, oh, so there she is. You know, like there's the goddess who's been pushed so undercover, you know, so underground, but she's still there. And I'm pretty certain that fans of the book of Revelation never see it this way. I wouldn't have seen it this way, but just the process of illustrating it was like, okay, we're still human. No matter how much we try to kick the goddess out of our consciousnesses, there's going to be something still there. So I just wanted to say that. And oh yeah, there she is, you know, nice and wet, the fountain going. And on that note, I will let me stop sharing the screen, and I will share that other little clip. Hang on just a sec, I gotta share that other little clip. God is male, here we go. All right, close this. Pardon me for having multiple windows out. I will get this right. There we go. Oh, and share sound. Yes, here we go.
God is male, he's old, he's white, his beard is long, his asshole's tight.
All right. Now I'll mute myself.
So that, such a lovely little ending there. Thank you so much, Nina. That was excellent. We have, Max is clapping there. She got her symbol up. Anyway, I'm gonna now share a few things. My name's Carol again, and I'll just tell you a little bit about my background. I actually am someone who's worked in the mental health field for a number of years with individuals, groups, and families in a variety of settings. And I'm admitting someone here. Okay. And let me just, and in the course of doing that, I saw a lot of women. My specialty area was women abused as children, and I've seen women who in a group that were incest victims, and I've worked with actually, in various settings, actually worked with some young offenders as well, sexual offenders. So I've seen the issue of sexual abuse from both sides, and in the course of doing, working with people over the years, I began to realize that, I was looking at what was happening in the world, in this country in particular, with regard to the spread of Christian orthodoxy and the infiltration of our government more and more as time went on. And, I was reflecting on my own experience. I grew up in what used to be called the Pentecostal church. When I was a kid, we called ourselves Pentecostals. They don't call themselves that these days. It's evangelicals, except apparently down in Brazil or wherever, that Max was showing earlier. But, in those days, in the old days, the Pentecostals were, they didn't get involved in politics back in the day. That was kind of really seen as, something that people shouldn't do, that Christians shouldn't get involved in that kind of thing. And so it was very interesting to me to see over the years, I got away from it in my teenage years, and started, exploring other kinds of traditions. And the thing that was interesting to me, though, as a longtime feminist, I was involved in marching for the ERA and, abortion rights and so on. And, I noticed that over time, what was happening is, when I was a kid, the Pentecostals and fundamentalists, the Protestants, they despised the Catholics, absolutely despised the Catholics. And yet, interestingly enough, as time went on, over the abortion issue, they started getting, one could say, in bed with one another over the abortion issue, and getting more and more enmeshed over that, and becoming more and more and more stridently vocal and public in their pursuit of what I saw as, the oppression of women, and they're trying to outlaw abortion, trying to, God, they just went nuts over trying to keep the Equal Rights Amendment from passing. We were on track, doing very well with that until, the Jerry Falwell and the moral majority, so-called, we used to have bumper stickers that said the moral majority is neither. But back in the day when people used to be brave enough to actually have bumper stickers, but they began to get more and more involved in politics, and it was starting to really alarm me increasingly. And I've been very, very concerned about this for many, many years. And the thing that is striking about, the three main Abrahamic traditions, I've noticed that, they all tend to be, all patriarchal. In their extreme fundamentalist forms, they're all incredibly misogynistic and even violent. So I was noticing these trends, and in the course of doing therapy with people, it began to occur to me that, a lot of the problems I was seeing with women with their low self-esteem and their tendency to be male dominated and have trouble with, asserting their own needs and that kind of thing. And I started exploring the whole issue of religious addiction and abuse. And in reflecting on my own history, I found that it was easier for me, as well as it really became very clear with other women in particular. It's easier to address other forms of abuse, even sexual abuse, and neglect and physical abuse and so on, than it was to really look at the whole issue of religion and patriarchal religion, and to question even how that might be playing a role in women's oppression and their, particular personal oppression in their own lives. I, had clients, one of whom I remember years ago, who was married to a heroin addict, and her minister was lecturing her about how she should, she was really distraught because of all of the kinds of things she was having to deal with because of his addiction and the way he was treating her and so on. And she went to her minister, who lectured her about how she needed to be a good wife and basically put up with this stuff. And I wanted to share with everyone that I don't know how many of you know this, but sexual abuse is, particularly incest, is far more common in traditional religious families. And this has been the case for, from the time we started looking at this. We finally started addressing this because of women therapists who believed their female clients. We really started dealing with this as late as the 80s. It wasn't really until the 80s when all this stuff really came out. And there were a whole lot of books written by therapists who were victims themselves, or who had been working, with clients who had been sexually abused and so on. and anyway, it's very common, you know, in a number of these very conservative, you would say. That's kind of a strange word, really, but because I see them as pretty radically fringe, but you know, there's in, but the more traditional they are, you know, you see a lot of sexual abuse. And we've learned about all the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church that's happened. There's also, you know, the Mormon Church, you know, that basically, they even in some backwater areas up in Utah, there still are practicing polygamy and even child marriage and so on. And you see too with some of these people that have started their own cults, like the guy in Waco, David Koresh. He who was a Branch Davidian, by the way, which is an offshoot of the Seventh Day Adventists. Anyway, he, in his cult, you know, they start out many times having sex with a lot of the wives of their, you know, flock, and then they move into younger and younger girls and end up marrying, you know, like, you know, children at 11 years old and so on, things like that. So anyway, the whole issue of religion and how it ties in with the oppression of women has been a concern of mine for a long time. I did some research some years ago looking at Christian orthodoxy, shame, attitudes towards women, and the fourth one was right-wing authoritarianism. And what I found was there was a very high correlation between Christian orthodoxy and negative attitudes towards women, and also right-wing authoritarianism. There wasn't, however, much of a correlation with shame, which my interpretation of that is that a lot of, you know, these people that these males in these churches, you know, that are, I mean, it's patriarchal and it's male supremacist, and so, you know, they have very negative attitudes towards women, and they're authoritarian, but they tend, you know, authoritarian personalities tend to transfer shame to other people rather than experience it themselves. And that's kind of my interpretation of that. But in any case, what I want to express here is my tremendous gratitude for these wonderful women that have come on to expose how global this is, and how long this has been going on, these messages. And I'm so thankful to have all three of these women here today. I wanted to segue now into, we'll have more time for discussion of all these issues. I also wanted to just point out that in this resource list that I put together, there are a number of films. There's some on the Hasidic tradition that you should check out. One called One of Us, and the other one is I forget the name of it. I can't think of it right now. But there's some on the Catholic Church as well, about sexual abuse and so on. You know, the one that was done, the Spotlight one, and then there's another one about a nun that was murdered a number of years ago, and the connections with a priest who was committing a lot of sexual abuse with young girls in the school there in Baltimore. But there's a bunch of other resources in there, and as well as all the resources I've been given by the women who are presenting today, but also other books and films that I would recommend that you look at. I want to say one last thing about authoritarianism. We're looking at authoritarianism these days on the right and on the left. It's not just a right-wing phenomenon anymore. And, we have the political implications of what's happening now. Oh, that's another one. Another film on there, The Family, that you should all watch, about the rise of the evangelical church in this country, and the infiltration of government at all levels is very, very sobering. We need to really look at that. So, and without any more delay, I want to turn the floor over to our last presenter, the wonderful Ava Park of the Goddess Temple of Orange County and the Museum of Woman. I want to actually, let me get up the bio on her so I can tell you more. I've been to her marvelous Goddess Temple. In fact, Ava is how I got in touch with Max and then I got in touch with Nina through one of the people in Feminists in Struggle. But Ava cares about only one thing: nourishing the primal power of woman to guide the world to goodness. Ava is the founder of the Museum of Woman, revealing the hidden history of woman from the Paleolithic to the present through the stories and statues of goddesses, queens, and wise women. The founder of the Goddess Temple of Orange County, the Women's Spiritual Circle of the Museum of Woman, and the author of the Queen Teachings for Women with Ava. Helping women access their four powers of woman: maiden, mother, queen, and wise woman, with emphasis on the powers of the queen archetype, the most denied, dismissed, and demonized of the female archetypes. When the queen shows up in woman, patriarchy melts. And that's why I wanted to end with Ava today. She's going to lead us through some wonderful invoking of the aspect of the queen in the goddess, as well as sharing some other things.
Thank
So
you
go
so
ahead.
much, Carol. Thank you. I want to just share, my heart is so full being on this circle with these beautiful women. I come to you from Orange County, where the land for thousands of years was tended by the Ahashman Nation. These are the original people of what is now called Orange County, the Ahashman Nation. And there are still a few Ahashman that they were decimated by Europeans coming to California, what is now called California, but they still exist. They still have a culture. They still have their wise traditions and teachings. We honor them at our temple, and we always speak their name and ask permission and a blessing whenever we speak publicly. Their cultural and spiritual leader is Reverend Adelia Sandoval, and so I acknowledge the Ahashman Nation. I also want to say thank you to Carol and the women of Feminists in Struggle, this organization, for putting this together. I want to say thank you to the women on the call, many of whom I know could be presenters. Absolutely, they have so many brilliant things to share. And one of the women, I believe, who might be on this call, if she was able to get on, is Vajra Ma. And one of the things that she taught me many, many years ago, I don't know, 20 years ago, is don't erase your teachers. So I always start by acknowledging, of course, I've had, like all of you, I've had many, many, many teachers, can't name them all, but a couple of them are right here on this call right now. One is Vajrama, and the other is Max Dashu. I want to give a special accolade to Max. I believe her work of many decades is a treasure now and will prove whatever happens. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what might fall apart, what might fall together, what might happen, but whatever happens, the information, the history, the truth of woman that Max has put together will be the most incredible resource, is the most incredible resource for us now, and will be in the future. So thank you, Max. And Nina, you may not know this. I don't know if you've ever been to our space in Orange County, our temple, but we have played your incredible videos to great cheering. So your name and your is very well known by the women of our space, and you have brought smiles and laughter and cheers to us. So very, very grateful. Other teachers, Ruth Barrett, amazing woman, Temple of Diana. Kathy Jones, Goddess Temple of Glastonbury. Mary Daly, authors like Mary Daly, Monica Sue, fantastic women. And some men like Stuart Wilde. He's a metaphysical teacher. He crossed over in 2013, but his last book, he came to Goddess. That was his last book, was about Goddess, after all the years of metaphysical teachings. So I was meeting him down to do some work in the mountains of Ecuador, and I landed in Quito, and this is a few years ago. And I had an afternoon to spend before our group got together and went into the mountains. And so I thought, well, I'll check out downtown Quito. And in downtown Quito in Ecuador is a fantastic colonial era church, Catholic church. And it is just glorious in its, stolen wealth, just every gold everywhere. And you walk down the main aisle, and at the end is, 20 feet high, a statue of Jesus hanging on the cross. And it's very imposing. And, I thought once again, wow, men's religions are based largely on renunciation and punishment. There's hardly any joy. There's hardly any, even the areas of Christianity that say God is love, you generally don't feel the juiciness of it. It feels dried out. So I'm standing there in this incredible church, and I can feel nothing except this awareness and of men's renunciation and the suffering of this poor man hanging off the cross. It's like, this cannot be religion. It's not my religion. And I heard this murmuring over in the corner, in like off to the side, one of the side rooms. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds magnetic. Let's go check that out. There was nobody in this church. It was completely empty. But I hear this murmuring. So I turn and I go in, and I go into a room, and it's got a very high ceiling also, but it's a very small room. And in that room is, 20 feet high, a wooden carved statue of Mary, but it looked like Goddess to me. It looked very pagan. And she had, it was beautifully carved. It was obviously well over a couple hundred years old. And her skirt was painted blue, and it had stars splashed across it. And she was joyfully standing there with her hand up, and at her feet were, 100 old women in black. And they were all murmuring their prayers. Nobody was with Jesus because there was no juice there. They were all with Mary. They were all with Goddess. And I just sat there on the floor because there were no seats. And I just sat there on the floor and looked up at this magnificent statue. And I thought, oh, I found Goddess even here in this Catholic Church, of course, because she cannot be denied. So men's religions are based on punishment and renunciation, but Goddess spirituality, to me, women's spirituality, I use the terms interchangeably, it is, I call it the PBJ religion, peace, beauty, and joy, peanut butter and jelly, peace, beauty, and joy. It's juicy. And that's how we created our temple. We have different rooms of, it closed due to COVID, but we had 3,200 square feet of beautiful rooms. You can see the pictures online, goddesstemple.org. And it's juicy. And when you walk in to this space that is completely honoring women, thousands of women have come through there, and many of them would just break down crying because they'd never been in a space where the beauty of Goddess was all around them. So we need to know our history, and we also need to have a new vision of what it can be,
You are woman, the ancient, natural, spiritual authority for humanity.
Can everyone hear this?
You are the authority for humanity because you are female, the primal form and basic template that authors life. The word
we can hear.
authority is obviously rooted in the word author, a word that originates in another word meaning to increase. With the power of our wombs, women are responsible literally for increasing life. This is the power that men do not have, and exactly because they do not have it themselves, this power to increase life is the power they are so very much interested in controlling. Hence, patriarchy and the continuing effort to control women's bodies and what we are capable of. You as women do not need to have a physical child to exercise this power of increasing life. Yes, men are creators too, but woman has a special cauldron, the chalice of her womb, that is a magical portal to other realities, as we shall see. As woman, you are the authority for humanity in general, and the spiritual authority for humanity in specific, because truly is not ultimately everything a spiritual matter. What is a spiritual authority? A spiritual authority is, among other things, a shaman. The word spiritual comes from a word meaning breathing. Woman is the one who creates from her own body another human body, and through the cauldron of her womb brings it from the unseen world, the spirit world, into the seen world, this world, with her sacred breath of life. In so many cultures, birds are a symbol for the shaman. Like a bird through the air, a shaman is one who is able to travel from this realm, this plane of existence, this dimension to another. And while in that dimension, gather up something very valuable, something not found here in this world, perhaps. Return safely to this world with that gift intact, and then deliver that blessing to the tribe for everyone's benefit. This is the reason so many of the most ancient statues of Goddess show her as bird or a bird-beaked woman. When a woman delivers a baby, she is bringing something incredibly good and valuable from the spirit world to this world. Women are the original carriers of the shamanic spiritual arts. Although now our original female shamanic history has been largely erased from the modern books. Ask 100 people to describe a shaman, and 99 of them will start with, it is a man who, or they will say, a medicine man. But the original shamans were always women, and giving birth is the original shamanic act for humanity. Deliver is from a word that means to set free. Every man who has ever lived is the child of a woman, a mother. And women who don't have physical children are also, of course, quite capable of using their womb powers to act shamanically, bringing from another world back to this one something good and valuable for themselves or for all humanity. You are the ancient natural spiritual authority. How do we know your female authority is ancient? It is clearly ancient because archaeologists have unearthed countless goddess statues dating from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic, proving that at one time, virtually every culture believed in an overarching deity as female, as Great Mother. Religions with male gods started just 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. Spirituality centered on a female deity, goddess, goes back at least 250,000 years. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all very young Johnny-come-latelys to humanity's long history of spiritual expression. You are the ancient natural spiritual authority. We know your female authority is natural because your wisdom literally lives in your natural female body. You are nature herself. It's always Mother Nature, never Father Nature. Your female body is created to function naturally, in tune with all other nature, connected to the moon, to the tides, to the stars. You are Mother Earth moving, walking, speaking, singing, smiling, laughing, teaching, shining, and holding the sacred dark in your womb cauldron. So yes, you are woman, the ancient natural spiritual authority, and you have powers. You have far greater powers than the male of the species. Your body, at various times throughout your life, is capable of holding life-giving wise blood, of conceiving life, gestating life, birthing life, and feeding life from your own female body until the progeny you have authored is able to live on its own. Men's bodies are capable only of fertilizing an egg. That's it. That's it, and that's enough. For men are perfect as they are created. Males are not inherently less than. Clearly, every creature created by Goddess has equal inherent worth. However, in this plane of existence, woman is, as we see from simple observation of reality, by far the greater power bodily. So you as a woman have powers to travel shamanically to other realms, and with your discernment, acquire something valuable, with your focus to return with that gift to this dimension, and with your generosity to give it to yourself, to your family, to your community, to your nation, to your world, to life itself, life herself. You as a woman have this power. How are you using this vast and magnificent power? What do you focus on? What do you do? What do you think? What do you act upon? What are you doing to use your female bodily shamanic powers to make life better for yourself, for your world. As spiritual women, we think on these things. More importantly, we feel into these things. Of course, with great power, we know comes great responsibility. If you are not using this power, you are abdicating your role as queen for yourself, for your family, for humanity. Are you an abdicator? No, no, you are not. You are a good queen, a powerful woman. In the time of the full moon, we particularly focus on the female body and her powers, her abilities, her joys, her pleasures, her experiences. Each part of your body knows what to do. Your toes know how to keep you in balance. Your feet and legs know how to move, to walk your female body around Mother Earth. Your hips know how to roll. Your belly knows not only how to make a baby, but every day how to transform a simple apple or bite of bread into an astonishingly complex female human. Your heart knows how to beat in perfect time over a lifetime. Your throat knows how to sing a unique song. Your lips know how to kiss lover, child, dog. Your nose knows how to gather the fragrance on the wind and the change in the air. Your eyes know how to see into souls. Your brain knows how to think. Your entire body is conscious and knows how to be conscious. All parts of you know what to do. If all parts of you know what to do, then you yourself as a whole woman know what to do every time. Trust that you, woman, know what needs to happen for life to work. You know in a way that most men cannot know. Men need you to guide them. Without a mother, no man would exist. Without wise women, all men are lost. All parts of you know what to do, and all parts of you need each other. Likewise, we need you with your female wisdom, with your knowing of what must happen for life to work well, what must happen for our world to be fair and prosperous, for our communities to be enlivened and vibrant, for our families to be contented and connected, for each woman herself to be peaceful and whole. You know these things. You know because you are Great Mother embodied. And Great Mother is the single eye, the divine intelligence in all, the interwoven web of wisdom, the theory of everything, the one consciousness that knows all the time. That's you. That's who you are. You know this, and we know you know. There are actions you can take in your life to express this divine intelligence. They may be small, accept that. They may be huge, accept that. Allow yourself to go into a reverie, a vision, a dance, a dream, or perhaps a magical space of the written word, and give yourself time to allow something clear and specific to come from the unseen world through the chalice of your knowing, through your belly, into this seen world. Whatever you are called to do, whatever you are moved to do, no matter how large, no matter how small, accept that. Small and simple is utterly essential for life too. Allow yourself to be a shaman woman for yourself first, and bring back a gift from another realm that will help you. As you are helped, so are you strengthened in clarity to give your gift to the world. And this is your magical shamanic act. This is you acting in power as the ancient, natural, spiritual authority for humanity. You were created to increase life. What is needed right now for you to do what you were designed to do, and do it with grace and ease and joy and pleasure? What is it? Women, men desperately need your wisdom. Without your guidance, humanity, led mostly by men, is suffocating in violence and porn, gasping helplessly for air in poverty and fear, choking on its own fundamental ignorance of how to live well on this would-be, could-be paradise of a planet. Women, give us your breath of life, increase life. You, and only you, have the power. Blessed be.
So just take in whatever you wish and let the rest float on by. I thank my teachers. I thank Vajra with her book From a Hidden Stream and all she has given me. And Max and Nina and Carol, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So let us drop in to our deep bellies. If you lost your womb due to surgery, no matter, you have your etheric womb, you are always a whole woman. Feel your awareness drop from your head down into your belly, where you are divinely intelligent, an intelligence far greater than anything in the brain, a whole intelligence that connects to the entire multiverse. And Great Mother, we know we are you embodied. We know you are experiencing yourself through us. So we are each goddess. We are each at the center of the universe. If the universe is expanding in all directions at one time, then each of us is at the center of the universe. So we drop in to our deep bellies and we acknowledge the maiden, the mother, the queen, and the wise woman and their powers. The maiden, power for herself, experiencing life, wild, free, running naked through the forest with her sisters and her hounds at her feet. No to-do lists, no computers. She is the honor of wildness itself, uncontaminated by men and men's ideas, pure and innocent, powerful, eternal. We acknowledge the mother, she who is for others, she who from her own body gives forth the goodness into the world, she who feeds the world. We acknowledge the queen, the guide, the leader of humanity, leading not like the hero, but like a midwife, not necessarily the star, but just seeing what needs to happen in any given situation for the best to unfold. If the group is the mother giving birth, the group gives birth to something, the queen is its midwife, helping to deliver, seeing what needs to happen with clarity, with vision, with humility, with the least amount of ego possible, but also with boundaries, boundaries on men and boundaries on her own mother self, so that she does not become the overgiving mother and exhaust herself. And Great Mother, we see and feel in ourselves the powers of the wise woman, the old woman, sacred and holy. We have these powers in us, Maiden, Mother, Queen, and Wise Woman, the library of humanity, the wisdom so needed by the world now. All these things live within us. We are all these. We are whole. and we give this beauty to the world. We are so grateful for our blessings. Blessed be.
Oh, thank you so much, Ava, for that. Well, we have now some time to, well, oh, it's almost 1 o'clock. That's okay. We're prepared to stay after the 1 o'clock time to have a discussion. We want to keep the discussion to the issue of the global, the role of patriarchal religion and the global oppression of women. However, that's, and the reclaiming the sacred feminine, not to be confused with femininity. Right, Ava? Where the sacred feminine is much larger than some idea of femininity, which is, you know, basically a male concept. So if you have put your questions in the chat, Rebecca, do you have some questions for us?